Okay, welcome to Commentary. I'm Danny Boyle, the director of 127 Hours.
I'm Christian Colson, producer.
And I'm Simon Beaufoy, co-writer.
So this is our partners, Fox Searchlight, and then should be Pathé.
The brave people who financed a movie about one guy stuck in one place who got his arm off. So thanks to them.
Yes, quick heads up. They can turn off now, having got their credits. If any of them are listening. Originally, I met Aaron Ralston in 2006, but he wanted to make it as a drama documentary. But we wanted to make it like this. And here we go. And we wanted to start. It's the loneliest film you could ever imagine, really. And we wanted to start with people and begin and end with people. And so we used this triptych idea so that we could get as many images of people unrelated to him, people he'll never meet and who will never know him. And there's a bit of India in there as a little nod to our previous effort, Slumdog.
That makes us different from animals.
And then I suppose the other thing to say about this is it's beautifully edited by John Harris, and we had this. We found this amazing song through our production designer Sutter at the Lab, and it's Free Blood and Never Hear Surf Music Again, which plays to the beginning, and we sort of bumped into during pre-production.
And here's a character who's not in a crowd, first solitary character we see in the film, who's sort of fleeing the crowd, I guess, at the beginning of the movie, and comes back to it at the end.
So I remember Simon actually wrote these bits, because I remember we just started with people. I can't remember where we actually put it, but then you wrote this lovely scene of him kind of tootling around at home before he went out.
And following his hand, I think so.
Yeah, it was that sense of him being very self-contained, and everything he wanted and owned in life he could put in his rucksack and just leave the world behind, except for, of course, for that, which he forgets, which is a kind of joke, really, a bit cheeky, to put a penknife right at the front, because everybody obviously knows exactly what he's going to do with a knife later on.
And we wanted to emphasise images throughout the opening, images of water, obviously, because that's, we all do it, we leave taps dripping, and that's going to become as significant as a nuclear war breaking out for him later on in his, just a few days later after this.
We shot with 2 units in the making of the film, and a lot of this material was just gathered whenever we got the opportunity. Either Anthony Dobmantel or Enrique Chediak, our 2 DPs, just went out and got this stuff. Enrique Chediak, our 2 DPs, just went out and got this stuff.
And the jerky stuff you see there, we use this, and we did this on Slumdog as well, we used the Canon stills camera, and we set it on 12 frames a 12 frames a second setting, and then it produces this stuttering material, which is really wonderful. Oh, here's the Tour de France. Oh, always have to have the Tour de France in somewhere if you can get them in. The most wonderful sport in the world, the most extraordinary sport in the world. And we had this idea about this guy, one of the last guys to ever see him, you know, and those moments that become incredibly significant later on when you remember the last person that you passed. But Aaron actually goes on about it in the book, not so much about people, but about trying to remember where was the last time he used his credit card, and will anybody from that place remember him? So you can imagine that tension in him of trying to remember stuff.
What happened to our jackrabbits, Danny? At some point we had some jackrabbits who were supposed to be chasing down this road.
Yeah, we thought they'd just turn up and that we wouldn't have to hire them. But we filmed, and there were no jackrabbits. So it's another cheapskate moment, which we didn't get away with this time.
Hey! Friday night!
This is the start of the video messages. He was a kind of compulsive self-recorder, Aaron Ralston, the real character. It was very early days to be taking endless footage of yourself. Now, very common with Facebook and everything, but at the time, quite unusual. And of course, it becomes really significant as the film goes on.
He's a bit of a pioneer of that, really. And it's interesting, we were talking about this. The film begins in the same year as the social network film begins, the Zuckerberg story and the establishment of Facebook. So, and they're both very, very bright guys. And this guy, Aaron Ralston, had turned his back on an Intel engineering career, which was laid out very promisingly in front of him. And instead he went into the wilderness and embraced nature, really, and in a very solitary way, which there'll be more of in a moment.
So one of the most spectacular landscapes on the face of the earth, I would say. We are shot in the real locations where the story took place in southern Utah, in the intersection between three towns, Moab, Green River, and Hanksville, in the middle of nowhere. And as you can see, it's quite spectacular. And when you're there, a very, 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 very hostile environment. We built a camp and had 60 crew sleeping out there, and it was quite something.
I mean, there have been attempts, he's very good in the book about it. It says there has been attempts to use the land, and it's failed, really, or there's a few old uranium mines, and they've tried to people have tried to work the land and have been driven away by it. There's a great saying in Britain about a Dartmoor, about farmers who try to work on Dartmoor, and it says, you scratch my back and I'll break yours. And I guess this is kind of like that, really. We wanted the beginning to be just exhilarating, kind of music and laughs and kind of fun and everything his life amounted to, really. And even an accident like that, he just laughs off, you know, and on he goes and inexorably forward and further and further and further away from people as he seeks this solitude, really. And our composer, A.R. Rahman, used, and here's a little bit of it, actually, he used guitar, solo guitar as the basis for the whole score, really. Even though some of the score is orchestral, but the tunes were all written on guitar, and that link with the West and the role of guitar in the West.
I love that he locks this actually happened. He did lock his bike up pointlessly, given that, I mean, who's going to steal it?
No, he says his father said, it was a lesson he learned from his father, his father said, why tempt good people? But it is in the middle of, it's sort of on the moon almost, in a way. You lock your bike up on the moon. You never know. This is a theme. So it's really interesting working with composers, the way they use music. So this is a theme which is actually in the background in almost everything else in the film. Every little bit of music in the film contains the essence of this, which was A.R.'s theme for the Canyonlands, really, and a moment of silence and beauty as is our job, really, to present in the middle of this ultra fast cut opening, to present the peace he finds here, you know, the beauty that he finds here on a personal level.
It was a strangely tricky little sequence to write at the beginning of this film, because you have to set up everything about this character before he gets trapped when the events take over, and yet do it in such a way as if it appears very natural and unforced. And I remember we worked on the scenes a lot to make them give little nuances of Aaron's character without sort of pushing it down people's throats, and make him fun and quirky, a bit goofy, a bit strange, but also this sense of a person trying to run away from life all at the same time, which was a kind of tricky combination.
That shot there is a tribute to Bill Viola, the artist, who is a famous shot of his in one of his films, and he's a guy who also uses triptychs a lot and multiple screens, and he was a stimulating influence on us in preparing.
I can take you that way if you like. Sorry, the Friday the 13th.
Kate Mara and Amber Tamblyn play Megan and Christy, the two real hikers that Aaron met before his accident, and goes on a last little adventure with, which becomes heartbreakingly poignant and important to him later on.
Indeed, and he says in the book they were angels sent to save him. And they do appear to save him at first, because they all agree to go off together, and in reality they just went dry climbing. And there is some video footage of that on the original tapes, on the original videotapes. But we decided to put them, because we wanted to again keep the opening saturated with water. We took them somewhere else instead. And it's where they go, this pool that they go to is a mixture, really, of places. It's a combination of different places. So if you ever fancy doing it, you'll have to be... There's a 4-hour journey involved between the two locations. From when you slide to when you actually arrive at the pool is about 4 hours drive. But don't try it anyway, because it's very, very, very dangerous what he takes them to do, actually. It's a kind of reckless moment. It's fun, and you don't see it as reckless, because you never do when you get away with these things. But it's quite physically dangerous what he what he does. And that was a little hint towards his slight recklessness, which he admits to in the book and in flashbacks in the book to other stories in his life.
But I know a better way. The cool way. Guaranteed best time you can have with your clothes.
So that was our first plane. It is amazing when you're down there. It's so isolated, and yet above you there's this canopy of planes constantly crisscrossing America on the way to Europe and Australia. I don't know where they're going, but
I think we heard a statistic that any moment in time over the airspace of the United States, there are something like 300,000 people in the air at any given time. Is that the right number?
a city in the air.
Yeah,
it's
all
amazing.
the time,
Yeah, all
every
the time.
day.
This scene always slightly gives me the creeps because actually someone did get stuck in one of these cracks in Utah and they couldn't get him out.
Just what we were shooting, yeah.
Yeah, so unlike Aaron, who managed to get himself out, this poor guy actually got jammed, and that was it.
All right. Now all you gotta remember is that everything will be okay.
Got to pay tribute to stunts here, because in the end, they're the lunatics who do this kind of thing. And we get all the credit, the actors, the director, the writers, it's producers, it's like, but it's those who risk hitting that water at, I guess, what are they doing? They must be doing like 50 miles an hour as they
At
hit that
least.
water.
It was a long drop.
And they wear special underpants, special reinforced rubber underwear, just in case they get entry wrong.
He's fine. He's bad shit.
That's a bit of Fish, actually.
Yeah.
That's which was Aaron's favourite band, and we could never work out how to use the Fish music in its original source way, because they're a jam band. It doesn't really suit to shaped music like this. It's obviously a live experience, Fish. So that was a little excerpt from them, yeah. That was an amazing shot, you're right, Christian, and that is a tribute to the guys in Salt Lake, the crew, who worked all day to set that shot up.
And day one, that was our first day,
Yes, it
full
was,
shooting.
yeah.
End of the
Yeah.
first day, they got that shot.
Yeah. And it was very, very difficult, very dangerous to stunts, and very brilliantly executed by our camera guys. So it's a big tribute to them, and it's, of course, used extensively in the trailers, so I hope they're proud of it when they see it. They should be.
Again? Camera!
Again, this was all part of the whole of the beginning, where you want to give a sense of freedom and euphoria and a kind of erotic sense of the water, all of those things that he's about to be deprived of.
And we cut a scene, actually, that cut across all that sort of idea that came immediately after that, where they were talking somewhat analytically on the rock. Do you remember?
Yeah.
So that went in order to keep...
It's probably a DVD extra, in fact.
yeah, this momentum that we've got at the beginning of the movie.
That's how they catch the horses.
Oh, wow.
Hey, you want to take one more picture before I go?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Ready? 1, 2, 3, blue John, blue cheese. Well, will I ever see you again?
That depends. Do you party?
Do I party? Yeah, sometimes.
Okay. Tomorrow night, we're actually, seriously, throwing a party if you want to come.
Yeah, you should come by, have a beer, kick back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So all these pictures he took, they all exist. And in fact, quite a lot of them are featured in Aaron's book, Between a Rock and a Hard Place. And this record that he constantly keeps, which is meant to be a treasure trove for him later on, but becomes a kind of lament for what he's missing, really. That's James's lovely walk away, which I swore was a specially prepared character walk. And James said not. He said, that's how I run anyway.
One of the few times that we cut away from him to editorialise when Kate Mara says, I don't think we figured in his day at all. And that, again, is a little read on...
That's slightly breaking the rules we had, where it's all subjective and it all comes through him. And if he doesn't see it or feel it, you don't see it or feel it.
And this is the real... we're now in Blue John Canyon, entering the actual slot canyon.
With the real S-shaped log that's still there.
Yeah, we move it later, but it hasn't moved so far anyway.
So talk a bit, Danny, about how tricky it was to film down there. I mean...
Well, it's very... I mean, we developed these cameras, the Silicon Imaging 2K, so that they're very, very flexible and could fit kind of anywhere, really. Anywhere that James could fit, they could fit, which isn't necessarily true of a film camera. And when we wanted to get as much of the real feel of the place from his point of view as possible, and... It's very beautiful. You get shafts of sunlight in it, but only for certain times in the day because it's so steep and narrow. And what happens is the slot, although the roof stays open, you go under and above these chock stones, which have been swept down by flash floods, down and keep going down. And he's descending, and you keep going down, although the sky remains open as it gets deeper and deeper as you go further and further down. And so it's an extraordinary feeling of an open grave, really. But great. I mean, I'd never done any canyoneering before, but actually lovely to do it. That's our big accident, which took a long... It's very dangerous. Seems like nothing really compared to big action movies, but it's a very, very dangerous thing to do, and that took us a lot of time. We started with that on the main shoot, was filming that.
Many days for those 3 or 4 seconds.
To get him down to the bottom safely and spectacular. There's our next plane. He's going to see a lot of those over the next 6 days.
The title card came up there unusually late, obviously, for a film. But obviously, we run it from the commencement of his entrapment.
This is key now, because we didn't really know how to film until we started. This is how we began the material that we filmed in sequence. And we decided to let James try and move the rock. Now, we knew it wouldn't move because it's actually sealed in there in the warehouse studio that we filmed in. But we said, it's got to be about... We can't fake this. This has got to be about you trying to move it. So he said, look, I will move that rock. I mean, he knew, because I knew, there's no way he was going to move it. But all he knew as an actor is he's going to go in there and said, I'll move that rock. And he said, but I'll probably only be able to do it once, because if I really go for it, there won't be much left of me at the end of it. And of course, that's a wonderful approach. I think that's one of the great things about playing it for James, and is a great benefit to us, is that it's a kind of proper method approach, really, in a way. And there's something extraordinary happens at the end of it, which he has to do as a result of what he's done, which is that he spends, as it was, 22 minutes trying to move this rock with all the might that James had, and he's quite he's a fit guy, and he cannot believe that this is happening to this super fit, ultra athlete. He can climb 14,000-foot peaks in the middle of winter on his own. He can run 3 marathons in a run in the desert, and this little pebble just stops him. So he just uses everything he can to, as he says here,
move this fucking rock!
And that was one take, right? The 20 minutes he did it for.
Yeah, and John Harris, then, the editor, chopped it down, and that was the style of the film. Suddenly we realised we're going to chop James around the screen. We're going to put him this side, that side. That's the intercutting you normally get with a film, with other characters or with what they're seeing. There's nothing to see here anymore. There's just him to look at, and so off he goes. And of course, he's so exhausted, he then drinks about a third of his supply of fresh water, which becomes, again... is a terrible moment for him after he realises. But that physical exertion, of course, makes him forget the kind of rational side of his mind. He's committed to it violently, aggressively, and suddenly realises, boom, that's a third of it gone. And you could be here a long time. And that is more precious. What's in that bottle is more precious than all the gold, all the minerals, all the oil, all the whatever the wealth of the world is. That's more precious than anything there.
So you just mentioned our set in Salt Lake City there, Danny, and we were previously talking about being on the real location at Blue John Canyon. And at some point, seamlessly within that sequence, we've switched, which is a tribute to Suturat Lalab, our production designer.
Yeah. And then you switch back. It's a mixture of two, really. You start this kind of move out in the studio on the set with a little crane, and then you blend it over into this, which is a series of helicopter photographs pulling further and further out from the real canyon. That big canyon in the distance, the big slot, is Horseshoe Canyon, which is massive. And this is just like a side slot. Blue John Canyon is just like a feeder, which is feeding water and dust and wind down into the main canyon.
And the big one's where he walks out at the end. So he rappels down to and walks out.
Yeah.
One of the strange things about this story that has always struck me is the surreal nature of the accident. One minute he's trekking along, no cares in the world, and the next minute this boulder hits him, and he's standing at the bottom of a canyon with his hand trapped, not particularly in pain, feet on the ground, just like he's shaking hands with this boulder. And it's as if everything else has carried on except he's had to stop. Normally with accidents, there's all sorts of trouble that goes along with it. You're in shock or you've got other injuries. And he was absolutely fine.
Yeah.
As we saw from the video messages, which we'll talk about later.
Yeah, it is just a handshake with something. It happens to be a canyon that he's in a handshake with. But yeah, that's what it is. And the more rational side of his brain begins to play out now as he begins to assess what has he got that's actually going to get him out of here, because clearly his physical might is of no use to him. And so he assesses what he's got, really.
This is his inventory, and we were careful not to give him anything that he didn't actually have. It was we were quite strict with ourselves in terms of the equipment and resources that we gave him, and they absolutely matched Aaron's.
Yeah, they went. I mean, Suturat went mad trying to get the real stuff. Some of it had to come from China, so to actually get the exact stuff that he had in 2003, and they spent a fortune on eBay tracking down people who had a copy of, he'd have an old Canon Allura camera from...
that's what the eBay bills were. Thanks.
And it was a stroke of pure good fortune that he had that knife with him anyway, because he had forgotten his knife, and in his truck, in the glove compartment of his truck, he happened to have just a spare one that at the last minute he thought, I'll bring that along, just in case. But I expect he meant just in case one of his shoelaces break or something, as opposed to this.
And this is really, this is the tribute really to how do you try and, it's a tribute to James really, and the camera guys, Anthony and Kike, is how can you keep the interest up with so little to play with, He's just chips now for 6 days. So an incident like this, which is an amalgamation of something that happened, he actually dropped his car keys, not his knife. And we changed it to his knife for obvious reasons, for our drama. I mean, at the time, he thought his car keys were significant because he thought, if I ever get out of here, I'll need to get back in that vehicle and drive to a hospital. So they were incredibly important to him.
Logically, if he ever did get out, he'd just pick them up. But anyway.
Well, yeah, I guess you don't think like that. Yeah, so it's much better to do this. And this is where we introduce our main supporting actor, actually.
The ant.
The ant. There were 20 of these, and these days, because quite rightly, you can't just use ants, you have to count them, and they have to be counted out again as well, so that you don't leave any. They were from Southern Utah. They were brought from Southern Utah and taken back there, I have to say, very carefully to make sure they were okay. And this is actually how he did recover his car keys, using his dexterous toes and a little bit of improvisation with a chopstick.
Very interesting when we watch this with an audience for the first time. When James says what he's about to say, there is this huge empathetic laughter that they share with him. And I think it's a wonderful moment in the film because I think it's the point in the story where the audience begins to understand that his experience is a little like ours.
Yeah, and you've got to have a little victory as well.
Yeah.
It's like oh
tiny little things.
Oh my God, what terrible! Oh my God, and you sort of know what's going to happen on some level in your brain. You need a little victory now and then to kind of get you through it, I think. This is the establishment of night. and the wind blowing in the canyon, and he would suffer terribly from cold. Not intense cold, just uncomfortable cold at night, because he'd left his fleece in his truck, you know, and because he just thought, I'll be through there in just a couple of hours and, you know, back to the truck. And so he just wore this T-shirt, this fish T-shirt. And
one of the interesting things I discovered on this is how difficult it is to convince people, because we were so obsessed with the idea of lack of water and thirst, how difficult it is to convince people on screen that if you're cold, you're thirsty too. Somehow the two don't work together. Hot and thirsty, yes. Cold and thirsty. Tricky.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We use everything, like the quality of the picture, the way it's graded, the use of the sound. Everything has to be as dry as possible to kind of somehow accumulate this feeling of dryness, really. And we had to keep James hydrated. So you'd have to make sure you keep watching to see that his lips don't ever look wet or there's not too much saliva around at different times. And his carefully regimented routine is sort of hinted at here, that he would take a drink every 90 minutes, I think is the regime he established for himself, to reward himself every 90 minutes.
And he does what human beings do, which is to begin to create some semblance of order in this new situation that he finds himself in.
And we wanted the water, we wanted a camera in there, really, because the water is God. And it's got to have a point of view, because as it drains away, as the time goes by, as the hours go by, and it begins to disappear, his life is disappearing with it, and which is true for all of us, actually.
This is the first of the flashbacks, I guess you can call them, of where what he's doing in the present triggers memories and thoughts and feelings about the past. And I think this is a very important strategy in the film of trying to make the story greater than the sum of its parts, if you like, trying to make it more than a survival story, and not necessarily film about a hero, but rather an anti-hero story. Although it's an extraordinary thing he does, it's important to show him he's just like you and me, a flawed individual.
He's just trying to find ways, really. Like, you know, when you read in the book, he just tried to rig this thing forever. And he's trying to find a way to present that, but make it tolerable to watch as well, or entertaining even to watch if you can.
That was a lovely bit of editing where there's a little pause and you expect, OK, this is the one in the movies where he'll definitely get it. And you very cheekily
and it still
make
doesn't
him
work.
not get it.
So he rigged this to sit down, and because he couldn't really, he couldn't sit down for very long because the circulation in his legs, you know, it got trapped, but the sense of just being able to take the weight off his feet. And they do say, if you want to torture someone, just keep them standing up. And after a day, they'll pretty much tell you anything you want to know, really, because if the chance to, it's really weird to think about it. And of course, yeah, he was, as Simon was saying, he's trapped in this standing up position, which seems like comfortable. It's agony, of course, after a while.
But also what kept him alive. If he'd been trapped with his feet off the ground, he would have died very quickly.
Yeah, you would think, wouldn't you? Yeah.
There were some amazing bits of luck about the story as well as it obviously being an incredibly unlucky experience.
Yeah. Aaron said, when we talked to him, he said, I never slept. And then we talked to him a lot further, and he said, well, maybe he had these micro sleeps that you weren't really aware of quite how much time had passed, or very little time had passed. Because we wanted to, and that's how we tried to suggest that literally, that he would just doze off for a few seconds or a few minutes, but then he'd be back on it, you know, back on the job of chipping at that rock, and in the same breath, blunting that knife.
It was another part of his discipline to chip. He didn't really think there was any point in doing it, but he had to give his day structure. Another of the reasons he survived when many people wouldn't, I think, is his extraordinary discipline, that he decided he had a job, and the job was chipping, and then every so often he'd stop and have some water and then get back to it.
And then occasionally there's a big event,
yes,
like the one that's about to occur. This is a big event in his day.
Yeah, these tiny things that happen in life and which we take for granted become seismically important and emotionally crucial for him to depend on. The first one's there was the bird, and then there's this, and he writes about this, it's so beautiful, the idea of the visitation of the life-giving sun. It's James plays beautifully, of course, and A.R. wrote this beautiful little track for it.
And beautifully lit too.
Yeah, the guys did this. It's so difficult to do this, to put a proper light, moving light in a canyon. To really replicate, to try and impersonate God's light is very tough, you know, especially when it's moving like that. And it triggers this incident, which he describes in the book. It's one of the bits of personal history in the book that we wanted to use, which is this key scene where him and his family go to the Grand Canyon when he's a child and see the sunrise at the Grand Canyon. And we couldn't afford to go to the Grand Canyon, so we used our own Larry, our great production manager, a great location manager in southern Utah, in around Moab.
Larry Campbell.
Larry Campbell took us to this amazing mushroom rock, and thank you, Larry.
Here we go.
We didn't bring his whole family there. We just had him and his dad because of what happens towards the end of the film, where he sees the lineage continue and he sees his own child in the future. So we kept it to just his father.
But having set up at the beginning of the movie a sense of his perhaps recklessness, I think this explains why he's drawn to this landscape, just the sheer beauty of it.
Yeah, he was formed early in life, attached to this landscape, and will, I think, forevermore will be, despite what happened to him.
This is the first of the video messages, which he really did, of course, leave a series of messages every day, switch the camera on once a day, and recorded these messages to his family and his loved ones, and really is the reason why the film is possible, in a way, because it means you've got a film where you don't just have one person stuck down a canyon on their own. You've actually got two people, himself talking to himself and talking to his family and his friends. And it allows us as filmmakers to then dive through the camera, if you like, and go back to his past and have these flashbacks, which give the film, hopefully, give the film its resonance.
Please try and get in touch with my parents and give them this tape.
It was wonderful recording these because James would take the camera and put it on the rock and he'd operate it himself if he needed to, like he's doing here, where he wants to show his family and what's happened to, what the circumstances that he found himself in. And the rest of us, we all just disappeared because we didn't have it linked to a monitor or anything like that. After he'd finished recording the message, I would go in and I would check it back to see how it was. But we weren't listening. And it literally was James on his own with a camera and a cheap, fairly poor quality Canon Allura camera.
The same one Aaron had, right?
The same one Aaron had I can't think, it comes from 1999, I think, or something like that. It originates, and so it's very poor quality. And yet it's wonderful to be able to use that quality to suggest his vulnerability, he hasn't got many resources at all. Now, this is the mystery of the missing kangaroo rats. Now, when we shot this, that dust was was created by kangaroo rats. And I don't know what happened to them, but they got cut.
Well, it was a kangaroo rat originally, and then we felt it was too much dust, so they became rats, and it still felt like too much dust.
Yeah. I guess one of the responsibilities is you've got to dash hope constantly, really, because as humans we'll try and create it out of nothing if we can. And it's false hope for him. That's one occasion of it. There's another one later, a much bigger one later. And you have to close off that avenue about, don't even think about false hope, really. And he examines himself being beguiled by false hope, being lured down the road of an easy, kind of cheesy way out of here, that people suddenly turn up, and he knows.
It's another example of the camera being his friend there. It teaches him something.
Yeah.
Which will inform his survival.
Yeah. Don't waste your energy. Don't waste your mind. Don't lose it, yeah.
Aaron. Do not lose it.
So we use very few cutaways, to the landscape. We try to limit those because he can't see any of them, and we just use them to establish, like the establishing of night here, and the bike's still there. Of course, nobody's tried to steal it, Aaron, and and he gets dressed for night. And again, this was an attempt we wanted to create, because we know there would be issues of tolerance for the audience because it was so unremitting what you were seeing. And so we tried stylistically to introduce as many variations of the way the film was shot. This was all shot on the Canon 12 frames a second camera, and then stitched together in post. And then you enter into an even more intimate world, his little temple, really.
Another example of the extraordinary resourcefulness of Aaron to use his rope and his rucksack and everything to keep him warm.
And he says dinner there. I love that. It's, again, the creation of routine.
Yeah, what a sign that he never for a moment gave up.
Tomorrow night, we're actually, seriously, throwing a party if you want to come.
Yeah, you should come by and have a beer. Kick back. Yeah, there's gonna
He
be
says he was not particularly hungry, but you kind of like, Christian says you said, no, it's dinner time, no, let's do it,
And he reaches for this thought because the party's actually happening now. He's been there 24 hours.
Yeah.
So he knows it's going on. Will he be missed?
Yeah. And of course, it shamelessly allows us to introduce a cartoon character, which
and some pretty girls.
all of which you take for granted if you're lucky in life. And of course, he's haunts him now about what he would do just to be there.
Don't mind if I do.
We never took James out of the canyon to shoot those scenes. We would shoot those scenes with a double over the double shoulder. Chad and Luke were two of our doubles and that was a psychological thing, really. So James would have no respite from this consecutive filming days in the canyon, and we'd build a pressure on him, really, which, like here, he's tormented about, shall he drink all that water? He would do anything to swallow all that water if he could, but he knows that's certain death if he does it.
And for the viewer too, it makes him absent from any of those scenes where we're not in this actual entrapment zone.
Yeah.
You never see or very rarely see his face when he's not here.
He multi-uses the water to clean his lenses. I remember reading that book about, I was astonished he had contact lenses in. I remember that I thought, what? He's got to spend 6 days with contact lenses, unable to clean them properly, and they were deteriorating seriously by the time he got out of there. Some people find this the worst.
Yeah.
People find if you don't wear contact lenses, you find that really tough. If you do wear them, it's like you just get used to it. But people find that one of the most difficult to watch bits.
Dad's in New York, so it'll be a quiet weekend.
Call me, okay?
We've all not picked up phone calls from our parents. I was saying to Danny last night, I did it only the other day, and I was one of the people who made this film, so I really should have learnt that lesson by now. But it's those tiny things that you take for granted. You think, I'll call her back tomorrow when I've got a bit more time. And for him, that was the biggest missed opportunity in his life.
Right there, Brian.
Maybe Utah, maybe somewhere else. Have a good one.
Always do.
Always do.
And that's a nice technique that begun to evolve with Aaron speaking some of his dialogue, his side of the dialogue from within the canyon. So again, we're not really leaving. Hope that ant was okay.
Yeah, James was very good. He let us put ants anywhere, really. God bless him.
Did that one make it back?
They did bite.
Let's go.
So here we go. This is a great use of one of our classic, I say our, it's like a common history of music, really, and the culture, shared culture of songs we all love, and brilliantly used, brought into the editing room by John Harris, the editor, and put on this attempt to him to achieve something in his day, his next great attempt. And it's a wonderful way of refreshing the palate. The circumstances are almost exactly the same, but, James has got new energy, he's got purpose, he's driven, I can do this. James actually learns amazingly how to do this one-handed. It's not easy, and Aaron showed us how to do it, to try and somehow get some ratio going and pull that rock off him.
This is Monday morning, isn't it? And he's going to work, sort of.
Yeah. And it's hope, really. But it's not fake hope, like, thinking he hears people. This is actually hope that he can kind of engineer and create. And, of course, like all other hope, it doesn't work either. It kind of gets closed off as well, And he's left with as he is increasingly, just with the state of his mind and his imagination to take us back to somewhere. And the world's all right with me. That's sort of the only thing that's important to him at the moment is Gatorade. He would do anything for a bottle of Gatorade. Literally anything.
There's a lovely quote in that film Clockwise with John Cleese where he says near the end, "It's not the despair I can cope with the despair, it's the hope I can't bear." I think that's really true.
Yeah.
Freaking me out looking at myself. Sorry.
These messages are pretty much verbatim, really. There's a change at the end with one of the final messages, or one of the later messages. But these are pretty much verbatim what Aaron said in his messages, and in which he describes. He's sort of like leaving evidence to say, I tried everything to get out of here. I don't want you to think I just gave up. I did try, and I've tried everything, including humour. Trying to keep my spirits up. And it tells a few jokes, and to try and get out of here.
There's a sling, power drill, and bolt kit.
The original messages Aaron still has on tape, and he showed very, very few people them because they're very intimate, and he promised his mother, I think, that he wouldn't show very many people. But they're an extraordinary testament, one of the very few times one will see somebody coming to terms with their own death on film.
Oh, Nate. I'm lucky. I peed twice. Almost pissed my pants. I don't know, my body's acting.
It sort of speaks to, again, a human need to tell stories. Somehow his commitment to imparting this information to us.
It smells really bad. But I'm sure it'll settle. It's gotta be chilled, like Sauvignon Blanc. No number twos.
And we tried to view the limitations of what we were doing as advantages. The lack of resources or the sameness of the location. And of course, if you view it like that, it does throw up that. So this is a very interesting intercutting of a message that you're then seeing why he's left that message. The events that led to him leaving that message are then replayed to you from earlier on in the day. And you get this dual time frame running. And then you get A.R. Rahman to kind of seal them together. It's a wonderful... This is not a very showy cue, but it's a wonderful cue. And you can begin to sense, without being bored, hopefully, you begin to sense that the days are exactly the same, because there's the sun again, there's that important moment again, there's the raven again, you know, and that sets up something that you get very strongly in the book, which is this endless repetition of his days, some of which he welcomes because it gives him structure, and some of which is clearly hell, you know, because there's going to be no change in this pattern until you die. But he does try to change the pattern.
So, I found this great tourniquet.
I think this is a wonderful bit of scoring. If you're interested in scoring, and just the way he illustrates this with very, very little, really, and he draws you through the character, realising that could help me, and it's a very difficult thing to score, because he's saying this could go somewhere, and actually, and then he shows that is it going to go somewhere? And then no, it's not going to go anywhere, and he does all that musically with it as well, which supports James's performance. Again, it's quite a painful one for James to do, because that's his real arm being squeezed up there, and the blade by then was completely dull, and he hacked away at it. It didn't do any good at all. And then, of course, James, as he has to, he makes sense of it all for us, because he then reveals that this message that he's leaving is actually showing you what has happened earlier. And he brings together sort of the two timelines like that.
Lesson. Don't.
And brings them together with a great joke.
Gagging where you can.
I'm not quite sure how that's going to play in China, or what they're going to replace it with.
Came free with a flashlight. The flashlight was a piece of shit, too. I kept it in my truck for emergencies. Not that I'm blaming you, Mom. There was a perfectly great stocking stuffer. And there's no way you could have ever known that I'd get in this kind of trouble.
When we watch this later...
It was quite interesting thinking, what does produce the memories that he does have? And sometimes we kind of just went with it as organically as we could. You can find a connection here. He thinks about stocking stuffers. He mentioned stocking stuffers, which is family. You know, family, you know, that sense of... And our memories of family are Thanksgiving or Christmas or birthdays, or, you know, where the family gathered together, or... And he thinks about his sister, and this was a strand that was going to pay off in a much bigger way, and we eventually cut, which is his sister's wedding, that he would agree to play piano at, because he was a bit of a pianist, Aaron.
Well done. Okay.
Treat Williams and Kate Burton play his mum and dad and do this very funny stuff about not understanding.
Yes, honey, keep going.
The wonderful thing about these little cameras that we use is that you can sort of get almost in any position, and eventually it begins to be that you can't even... You're not quite sure where you are in the canyon. I'm not quite sure where the camera is here. Well, I know where it is, but it sort of feels like you can't quite work out quite exactly where they... And it was wonderful for that too, because we need to create as much variety of setup as possible. Another awful moment to go with drinking a third of his drinking water right at the beginning, and there's another awful moment where he loses half of what was left. I mean, when that kind of thing happens, he goes very, very deep, really. A lovely memory, which again is one of Aaron's about. He called it the Chinese fire drill, where they get out of the car naked and run and change places in the car and things like that, and we just kept it in the car. And it's very simple, of course. His role is all the things he took for granted. And I certainly speak personally. I've done this as well. Well, not done this kind of scene, sadly, but I've taken people for granted, and it becomes a story. It doesn't become a biopic of Aaron Ralston. It becomes something that represents, that is for all of us, really. Because I think a lot of guys would recognise that.
And the memory starts in that car scene with real joy and modulates into something more regretful and reflective here. James does it beautifully.
We were trying to build up this notion of second chances. What if you had a second chance? And we sort of build that up right to a climax later in the film where he thinks he has a second chance and realises, I'm still stuck. And there's something very poignant about that idea of going back and fixing wrongs, righting wrongs, if you can. And if you can't, the pain of that. And that was a very important, quite subtle emotion that we wanted to convey.
I love that the bottle of wine in this scene is a Sauvignon Blanc, which takes on a different significance later on, if you remember.
Yes, indeed it does. Clemence Polsey played this beautifully because we didn't allow her to have the real James because we wanted him to be always separate from it and always in the canyon.
I think I have it.
So, The Flash Flood.
Completely stolen, there's no point in denying it, from an Ambrose Bierce short story called Incident at Owl Creek. Again, it was this sense of we had so few tools as filmmakers here in a way. It was so limited, constrained by one character, one location effectively, that somehow we had to approach everything from every angle to mine the emotions of the main character. This becomes the lowest point in his journey, really, when he believes that maybe, just maybe, he can escape.
Aaron is obsessed in the messages and in the book with flash floods. He's an experienced canyoneer and he knows they happen. They're very intense and violent, and people are killed every year in Utah, caught by the unexpected ferocity and almost instant power of these flash floods, which form these canyons, of course.
The boulder's there in the first place because it's washed down by the river.
And the water from 20 square miles will feed into these narrow gullies. And he's very funny about it in the book. He says, well, at least I'd get a drink, which is what he's desperate for more than anything. But, of course, he will drown as well. But it proves to be an opportunity.
This was the last thing we shot because we had to trash our set in order to shoot this. And I don't think I've ever seen so much water in my life. It was something else.
Yeah, Blair, the special effects guy, did all this. Fantastic job he did for us. Brilliant guy. And all his team.
The music's come right down in Glenn Fremantle's fantastic mix throughout the movie. Comes down there and then pushes up again here.
We caught a little bit there, which actually one of the things he did before he drank that bottle of Gatorade that he'd been fantasizing about for so long, but we decided to press on with something much more significant.
This, I think, is the ultimate memory he had of being able to go back and say sorry to people, really. And of course it turns out that he can't, and he's still stuck there. And that's the sort of the nadir of his journey, really, the ultimate horror of thinking you've got out in a dream, maybe, and then waking up and realising you're right back where you are in the canyon, and you can't, not only can you not escape, you can't speak, and you can't right those wrongs.
I love this cut that's about to come in now. It's very desperate, very sad. That.
The only moment of self-pity in the film, actually, and that's true of Aaron. In the real video messages, very little self-pity, which is extraordinary. Mine would be just a sobbing mess of self-pity. He didn't have that. He had a great deal of dignity.
Where did you find this song, Danny?
Esther Phillips. It's based on it's her version, Extraordinary Story, that woman, and an Edith Piaf original, Le Hymne d'amour.
Good morning, everybody.
This came out of a sort of thought of, OK, we've got him to his lowest emotional point ever. Where do you go from here? And we had this.
Good morning, everyone!
And it's crazy, but it's wonderful because when you hit that lowest point, are you going to die? No, actually, you're not. I mean, you're going to do something insane instead, but you're not going to die. And he gets up, and he leaves, and his mind is going, but leaves this insane message.
Aaron! Let's hear it for Aaron!
And also, if you don't reveal your deepest, truest thoughts about what a fuck-up you've made of your life through a kind of self-pitying role, how do you do it? And I thought humour is kind of coruscating and self-critical and also funny, which actually in the film, you need some humour.
Yeah. And James, of course, grabbed hold of this like a great actor will do, and you didn't need to tell him to do it, how to do it. You just needed to arrange the cameras, really, because he had this down, really. And it's funny, they don't look... Sometimes an actor like him doesn't look like he prepares very much, and then they turn up and they kind of lash you with this, and you realise there's a lot of preparation gone in there.
Well, Brian at work.
Hi, Aaron.
Hey, I probably won't be making it into work today.
The only thing he said to me, James, he says, you will put a crowd on this, won't you? Otherwise I'll look really stupid. I said, I'd like you do. I promised him everything, of course. I said, of course, James. We did, in fact, yes.
Loser Canyon, Utah. Aaron asks, am I right in thinking...
It also is very good because, of course, it contains some information which is very difficult to convey and very awkward to convey, but is very important. There's actually that nobody's going to be looking for him yet.
Yeah.
Not properly, anyway. And that must have been occupying his mind so much because he knew it was true because he's an expert.
Yeah, he worked for the rescue service, and from the minute he got stuck, one of his very first thoughts is he did a few calculations and went, nobody's going to report me missing for 4 days.
It was interesting. We had a scene at the beginning of the film where he explained to us very early on what his options were, chipping away at the rock, making a pulley system, waiting for rescue, chopping his arm off. And that came out, and we discover these options live through the course of the movie, which keeps the story developing. This obviously was not a verbatim message, in case anyone's wondering. This was some license taken by the filmmakers.
That despite, or maybe because you're a big fucking hard hero.
But there were hints at this in his messages of him trying to keep his spirits up, trying to perform almost.
Yeah, it's a coping mechanism, humour, isn't it? I think the worse things get, the better the jokes sometimes.
Oops.
I love this because this is... You give an actor a camera and, you give a great actor a camera, and it's very simple, of course, what we go to the cinema for sometimes. It's just that direct connection of seeing an actor play out things for us that we recognise about ourselves or that we regret about what we've done. You could recognise, and this message to his mum and dad, every time he leaves this message, I mean, I've seen this hundreds of times, every time he says this, I feel it very, very deeply. It's so beautifully expressed, and it's verbatim.
Yes, it's verbatim, yeah.
And he does it so wonderfully, this, really.
And it's an amazing swoop by James from kind of high surreal comedy just through one word, oops. He goes all the way down to this, which is terribly intimate.
And in one sense, the end, really, because after this, he finishes his water. He decides to eke it out no more. He might as well just... And he just drinks the water and then makes his second attempt on the arm, because at this point, there doesn't appear to be anywhere else for him to go, really. At the time, I'm sure he probably thought that's the final will and testament. You know, that's the final thing I can say to them. But he's still got deeper to go, actually. He's still got further to go in terms of recognition about himself, not just about that he may have disappointed his mother and father, and although he feels that. We started this process by which Aaron talks about feeling like he's about 15 minutes away from a heart attack, and his blood is thickening. Ironically, that will be one of the things that actually saves him in the end from bleeding to death. But it's trying to find a way to represent a heart attack, an imminent heart attack or organ collapse.
Lovely little hiss of escaping gas there. It's a nice touch.
That actually belonged to the thumb, but we never did that. In the book, he pricks the thumb and the gases escape from there. But we wanted to get that sense of it. You know, nothing good is going on in there, Aaron.
Yeah, he said it was a dead thing, wasn't it? That he
yeah.
got to get rid of it one way or the other.
Yeah, and that it would kill him. Interestingly, it was pinned so tight that the poison that was in the hand was not seeping back into his arm as much as it might have done. It might have killed him very, very quickly because it was pinched so tight, and there was very little pain from the hand after the initial impact of being trapped. We follow this principle of drink anything, you know, so he drinks the blood and, you know, because he will do literally anything for moisture.
As this reveals.
Indeed it does. And this is why, obviously, one of the reasons that the camera inside the water, inside the pipes, inside the bottle was so important is that we wanted to put audiences now literally feel what it's like to do this, brilliantly acted, of course, so that you can descend with him further and further the whole time, which is crucial to him eventually getting out. And again, great gag here. After a moment like that of, oh my God, shall I stay in the theatre or shall I leave now? Do I really want to watch a film about a man drinking his piss? Well, at least he can tell a gag about it.
I think we should credit James with that line, actually. No?
I think it's Aaron's as well, actually, but I think it's a bit of both of them, actually, but whatever, he does it brilliantly.
It's like a bag of piss.
And now a deeper significance of the cameras, something not just objectively recording him to pass back through to his family, but something to kind of comfort him, really, as he's dying. And he goes back to see and hear people's voices, company, something he turned his back on. She said, I don't think we figured in his day at all. Little did she know that she figured in his next 6 days very, very intensely as he watches this material.
Tom, we're very worried about you.
Lovely that they're talking directly to him. That's very touching. An impossible conversation, because he can't reply again. Can't say anything back.
You may be sort of cute.
And they represent sort of everything now, don't they? Everything that he's lost, life and sexuality and everything he's lost.
That was Ted. All right. I'm going to test your theory about whether or not it's better to do.
So the comfort of a woman and of company and sensuality and of course it's all surrounded in water. This isn't in Aaron's book, but I always thought, would he comfort himself like this? Because, again, it's that thing about we're not making a biopic, it's actually trying to explore it through James. And we talked about what comfort you would try to give yourself, you know. And in fact, in respect to Aaron, he doesn't. And he says, don't. And he stops himself. And I'm sure probably if you thought about it, it's basically keep your strength, or it's out of respect to the girls. I don't know. But he doesn't. He has to get on with dying now. And he, as Aaron did, he scratched his epitaph into the canyon wall, really.
Which always struck me as a strangely self-referential thing to do, almost like he's making his own art installation of his life and death. Very strange decision to use your last strength to carve your name in the rock.
I think he was probably just... I was trying to think how boring it must have been.
He said he was very bored, yeah.
It just... Because the chipping was doing no good, he was just doing it to keep warm and keep active. And so I guess he'd be just looking for anything he could do. And it is weird, of course, because there are petroglyphs in those areas of paintings of people left on the walls. So there's all that. This was meant to be not, as it happens, Scooby, but it was meant to be a 6-foot raven, like looking at him, ready to eat him. And I remember it was one of the things Aaron said, please change that in the script, because that bird was so much to me, meant everything to me, and I don't want it depicted, even though I know it's true, I don't want it depicted as being something that would be malevolent to me, or to be something that would...
Yes, it was his friend, wasn't it?
It was his friend, and he didn't want it to... Even though he acknowledged, you know, that's actually what would happen, of course. So the planes, we see them all. We thought, well, should we keep showing them, or should we see them all at once? And we thought, no, let's see them all at once, really. And all those, as Christian was saying, 300,000 people are all there above him, in the ceiling above him. And that led him to think about, you know, to fully explain to us and to himself why he wanted to go back to apologise to that girl, to Clemence.
Is that what you want?
The scene was originally written as a very intimate bedroom scene between the pair of them, just them. And Danny very brilliantly said, I want to set it at a basketball game, which at the time struck me as a crazy suggestion. But of course it's carrying on that notion of crowds and people and the things he's escaped. And also sometimes that's the loneliest place to be, amongst a huge group of people.
Yeah, I mean, he's embarrassed at that time by her, you know, emotion in public. He doesn't want to know about it, and now it means it doesn't matter. Embarrassment in public doesn't matter, you know.
And that rebuke that she gives him there becomes a sort of great lesson to him now. You're going to be so lonely, Aaron. And now sort of informs. Yeah.
And it allows us to reintroduce the triptychs because we've used crowds with them before, and so it allows you to float it in without it feeling too stylistically arbitrary or, you know, interventionist. So it feels more organic too.
My heart's beating really fast. I swear to God, I feel it.
It also allowed us to do the repetition of the days, because towards the end, the days were just repeating themselves. He was drinking urine. He was, you know, kind of just trying to keep himself alive, hallucinating, seeing figures from history.
I think this is a masterpiece of editing as well. If you're interested in editing, these 3 screens, how they relate to each other and how they guide your eye backwards and forwards.
Rain. Been thinking about you, girl. Been thinking about you, girl.
That's a beautiful line from the real tapes.
I know how I am. I tried to do
Aaron actually hallucinated, and obviously the triptychs are very useful for that. But his hallucinations, he left the canyon. He walked out through a doorway in the canyon wall and went back to his living room and found friends and family there. And we obviously decided we didn't want James to leave the canyon under any circumstances whatsoever. So even in the flashbacks, he's not really in them. And James didn't experience them, so he is trapped and trapped and trapped. But they come to visit him to offer a kind of silent support, even though they barely know he's missing yet. And yet he sees the strength that they can give him, you know, that they can provide for him.
that we play. I'm sorry. I know it'll be a good one. 8:15, there's no Raven. 8:20, 8:30, my Raven didn't come.
So his movement towards grace, towards a real understanding, it has to be about him looking at himself, really. He realises how much he needs those people now, but he also has to understand that, as he says, it is him.
It's me.
Aaron, it's Mom.
I talked a lot to Aaron about this strange sense of fate that he had somehow been walking towards a confrontation with death for a long time.
This rock has been waiting for me my entire life.
This rock!
In its entire life, ever since it was...
There are certain sort of people who, if they go towards the edge of danger and step back and get away with it, they stay back and go, phew, I got away with that. And then there are other people, Aaron being one of them, who go, I got away with that last time. I'm going to step a little closer to danger, see what happens then, and a little closer and a little closer. It's not a death wish exactly, it's a strange sense of self-challenge and pushing towards something existential and difficult and dangerous. And he was on that journey, getting closer and closer to the edge, pushing himself further and further. And so when we wrote the line, this has been waiting for me all my life, Aaron looked at that and he said, that's how I feel.
So Blue John drives his horses, as the Sundance Gang did, as the Hole in the Wall Gang did, through the canyon and history, the past, and he desiccates into nothing, really, which is sort of what he imagines he will, as we all do, really, what he will become. And I guess in some way he thinks that's the end, really.
By all standards, he should be dead by now. I mean, he'd worked out, as a guy who knows a lot about these things, he'd worked out that without water, he shouldn't be alive at this point.
But he'd found true understanding, really. An epiphany is offered to him, really, which is all the trappings of being a religious moment, but actually isn't. And he's very clear that it isn't anything to do with religion. It's not Jesus, it's not Buddha, it's not... That this child is... The last thing on his mind is parenthood. He's 27, he's not really interested in settling down, nothing like that. But he sees this child and he knows directly and immediately that it's his child in the future. And obviously we put it on the family sofa to connect it back, to create the sense of the lineage, really, because his father and he have been around that sofa. And
it's the life he's not going to live.
Mm. So AR wrote this amazing song with Dido to suggest this most delicate, most fragile and vulnerable moment, really, before the actual technical horror of him, actually what he had to do to get out of there. And it sets it up amazingly. And I love this. It's this line she sings here as he watches the boy disappear. And he reaches for him.
Have one more try. If I believe.
And there is more than this, and he suddenly is aware of how he can do it. And it's very, very, this is all, including the child, very, very accurate to the book now. Because although we experimented in different areas of the film, this is one area where we were not going to experiment with at all. We did it exactly as he describes it in the book. And including the level of noise, he describes the gunshot that goes off around the canyon when that happens, when he breaks the bones, one after the other.
I think we used a gunshot effect. Yeah?
I think so, yeah. This is a brilliant performance by Franco. His commitment to this was just incredible, really. Because obviously it's highly technical. It's a fake arm based on James's arm, but built interior-wise to be a perfect replica of a human arm. You know, the musculature brilliantly built by this guy, Tony Gardner, and his company, Alterian, I think they're called. And we did very, very long takes of this, in which we would let James just get on with it, really. Because I thought if we make it, it's so technical, if we then make it technically filmed by constantly stopping and starting and doing bits.
The laugh that Aaron gives when he snaps the second bone is absolutely true. For him, it was the answer. And once he'd snapped that second bone, he thought, everything is now possible.
Mm. It took him over 40 minutes, and we tried to suggest that's why the scene can't be short. We tried to suggest with glimpses of his wristwatch, you know, the time passing. It takes him over 40 minutes, and it includes some extraordinary experiences of pain. He keeps saying, don't pass out. And then he finally, when he actually gets to this nerve, the description of that in the book is, that was our obligation to try and represent the pain that involved for him. Something that most men will never, ever get near in their life. And he had to not only get near it, but push through it. And he describes it as pulling a guitar string off a fret, you know, pulling it way, way high.
Like a thread of angel hair pasta, I think he says.
Yeah.
That thin.
So again, these things are extraordinary to watch. I mean, it's built up out of the skills of the people involved, not just James, which is extraordinary, but Anthony and Kike, the two cameramen, and then John Harris, the editor, and then this, you know, this insane composer we've got, A.R. Rahman, who's just able to take you on this journey, which involves intense beauty, a reminder of the child to keep him going, but is ferocious. It's the sound going on in his head as he's pushing himself through the pain of just trying to push and get through it. And the step back, when James stepped back, I remember that look on his face when he'd done it. It's just absolutely extraordinary. I think he thought he wasn't actually going to get through the prosthetic because there's a steel bar inside it, but he did. He cut that as well. And he led to this, nobody knew when, nobody was quite sure when we were going to say cut or stop, or, well, you can't say cut in circumstances like this, but because everybody's, I am. It's like... And it's a mystery then, the aftermath. How do you do after something like that? You can do something like that because you can commit to it physically. And how do you do the actual postscript of it? I don't know. You can't really. You just have to get on with the business of life, which is get a tourniquet, wrap it, bandage it.
He was practical to the last, still using, sort of cannibalising his equipment to protect his arm and make a sling. The thought process was still incredibly clear.
Mm. And this is extraordinary. People laugh about this because I think they know it must be true, because no lunatic would invent this. No lunatic filmmaker would invent this.
No, you would never write that particular scene.
But that picture exists in his book. He did take a picture of it before he left.
Thank you.
And he did say that to whatever and whomever it was he was saying it to. And he's not a religious guy at all. So it's open to think who he's actually saying it to.
The real park rangers came back the next day and lifted up the boulder and took the hand away and cremated it.
And Aaron took it back, took the ashes back and scattered them in the canyon.
And he was still in real life a long
Yeah, I think he was
a long
4
way from
hours
survival.
away.
Yeah.
So even though he'd cut his arm off, he still had an extraordinary journey to go on.
Yeah. So they always say, and we found out to great delight, always have a dance in a movie if you can. And we'd benefited from that, we have to say, greatly. So we thought, well, we've got to have a dance. And he thought, there's no way. How can you greet this proper sunlight life again, you know, without a little bit of a dance? And that's James's audition for a dance. But more seriously, and this is all true, of course, down there, at the natural end of that canyon, the water splashes down and stays there in a pool. Even in high summer, there was some water there when we went there in high summer.
And again, here, this is absolutely the actual location where the events took place.
And there were only 2 of those fixtures for Arran, but the 2 further ones have been added since, and they're left there, and we didn't interfere with them because climbers depend on them, and we didn't. And James did this rappel down one-handed. This is quite scary if you've never rappelled before. We did this. We all had a go at this. Whoa, it's scary, even though you're told it's not. There's lots of material on the added extras where you'll see that we did play with this scene and put a kind of fake fall in and like the last worst fear in his mind. But in fact, we cut it in the end because actually you have to be honest to the fact that even though he is a one-handed and in intense pain, he knows how to do this. So we were less dramatic and actually more honest to his ability as a person, which is that once he got over that ledge and started going down, he knew he could do this because he's a climber and he's done it a lot before. We didn't want to get all Hollywood on it, really, and cheese it up. Although there is a section where he nearly loses the rope, which happens earlier, which is true. But there was an emphasis, really, on getting him to the water as quickly as possible now. For the audience, really, the tolerance for what the audience
suffered
had been
enough.
through.
There was a sense he's suffered enough.
We've got to get him out of there in some way. And people find that really gross, the water he's eventually drinking. But as he says himself, he would have drunk there could have been anything in that water and he'd have drunk it. And he drank and drank and drank and drank and drank. And drank and drank and drank and drank and drank.
As far as he was concerned, he still had a 4-hour hike.
Yeah.
To get anywhere, he wasn't expecting to see anybody at all. So still surviving absolutely on his own resources.
More planes. Am I getting any closer, though? They are there the whole time when you're filming there. The place is so deserted, and yet there's these 747s just leaving trails, paintings in the sky. This Horseshoe Canyon is visited occasionally by people, and we did do the walk because it contains one of the great, it's called the Great Gallery, one of the great galleries of art there, which represents, supposedly, as far as we know, the high priest of the people who lived there. So there are many generations of people who've lived there long ago.
And they're entombed. They're pictographs of the entombment.
Yes.
Entombments.
I don't think he'd have got out of this canyon. We did the climb out, and it's very, very tough when you're fit and healthy. Now, I can't say because he's extraordinary what he did, but so maybe it's wrong to say that, but I'm not sure he would have been able to climb those 1,000, it's like 800 feet, 1,000 feet to actually climb out of there. Very, very tough in the blistering sun, in the condition he was in. And so these people that he miraculously comes across, who've been photographing the petroglyphs. This is the lovely Mayas from
Holland.
Are his lifeline. People are his lifeline, and it's extraordinary that this man, this super fit, incredibly independent, self-sufficient hero, has to say in the end, he has to scream to these people in the end.
I need help!
And admit that we all belong really together in some way, I think, and that's what leads us to this piece of music, that the euphoria which it's leading towards, which Aaron says it's about ecstasy, getting out of there and life being given back again, is linked to these simple people whose look of astonishment on their face, what it was like for them to hear this guy shout this story at them as they walked up to him and see this monster from a horror movie walking towards them, and they've got their son there. You can see him keeping hold of his son. Like, what is going on? You must have thought, this is the Chainsaw Massacre moment. We were warned about it in the movies, and here it is. But it's not, of course, and they work together. Everybody works together, and we get to be able to reintroduce people. There's a wonderful thing in this, which we're so proud of, which is that this helicopter, which eventually arrives, contains a guy
called Terry Mercer,
who actually was in the helicopter, flew the helicopter that actually landed in this canyon that rescued the real Aaron Alston. And Terry was only his last couple of days before he retired.
Was his last day?
It was his last day before he retired. So his last job was repeating his most famous job in a way. And he was great, actually, because he turned up and did this movie, and he was as... You realise what these guys are, they're just absolutely no-nonsense. He wasn't impressed by any of the movie or anything like that. He was like, he's not impressed by any of this kind of Hollywood stuff. He was just a guy, a regular guy, who's done his job his whole life. God knows how many people's lives he's saved. And he was embracing his retirement, and this was a nice moment for him to end on, really. And that's the guy that you eventually see piloting the helicopter as they lift off and get out of here. Yeah, it's a big thank you, Terry. There he was. Enjoy your retirement, Terry.
In Aaron's book, he says one of his most consistent thoughts was that he was going to get blood on the white leather seats of the helicopter, which is an extraordinary thing to worry about, given his situation.
So as you'll see on the extras, we did have a whole sequence of scenes before these triptychs at the end, and we cut them all in the end because we wanted to carry people through, emotionally through, back to the sense of people. And the rest of the story can never compete, qualify the essence of the story, which is that he's given a second chance, really. Extraordinarily, the benefit of he's got a chance to get life back again, and he acknowledges the silent support of the people who kind of got him through that.
And here we mix some of our cast with some of Aaron's real friends and family on that sofa shot.
And that's Jessica, his real wife, and Leo, their baby. And it was wonderful that she agreed to appear in the film at the end. It gave us such a boost. Because it's hard for, you know, people who are not involved in the movie business to... But she was wonderful that she would agree to appear. And we hope the film's a testament to an extraordinary guy, and who will have the story to tell to his son one day, really. And we hope this film will maybe play some part in him doing that.
And it was beautiful to hand it back to him in that last shot.
Yeah. OK, credits, which is tribute time. James Franco goes without saying, really. What an extraordinary job he did for us on it. Oh, a particular mention to Treat Williams and Kate Burton, two of our very experienced actors who gave it themselves very willingly. But also, a big thanks to Donna Isaacson at Fox for casting all these amazing actors, actually, whose parts were not that rewarding, but they gave everything for something they believed in as a great story. And to the stunt performers, stunt doubles and doubles, and they've done a great job for us.
And there are John and Bernie, our UPMs, who are really the engine room of the production. They put in an incredible amount of work to keep the wheels in motion at all times, so our thanks to them.
And David Tickerton, who was my first on the film, was extraordinary guy. And thank you, David, very much. And all the people that work with him throughout it like that. And this beautiful song, actually, is Dido and A.R. Rahman. It's extraordinary. And I love the bit where she says, if I believe there's more than this, when he gets released from the rock.
And our associate producer, Dermot McCown, who works very closely with Danny and I at Cloud 8 and Decibel Films, our thanks to Dermot, who does masses of work.
And Duff, whose house we first moved into when we first started.
We did pre-production there.
We did pre-production there. And all Sutter Rats crew on the set, and set dressing and all that, and all the photography guys.
All these names. It always amazes me how many people we sit here 6 months after the event and...
Yeah, oh, but there's one. No, we have to pick out Glenn, who has done virtually all of my films and is an extraordinary element in the film. What I call a mini director. They never get the credit, but they basically contribute as much as you do yourself. And all the people that they work with, all the different people who do all the kind of ADR and all the special effects in the sound, special effects in sound. And big thank you to Roger and Alan Stoddard, whose father Dave died during the making of the film, peacefully in his bed. But it brought great sadness to him, and there's a dedication at the end of the film for Dan, because the film will always be remembered in the wrong way for Dan, really, and we're very sad about that, but very happy to dedicate the end of the film to him.
We just saw Tony Gardner there and his team at Alterian, who were responsible, as we were discussing earlier, for all the prosthetics.
Including the infamous arm, of course, which they did an extraordinary job on.
Don't forget Gaia, without whom none of us would be here.
Yes, and Heather, who picks us up every day in every way and got coffee to us at the first thing in the morning. Fantastic, thanks, Heather. So many people to thank. Yeah, I think I've mentioned Donna Isaacson, and there were other people who helped us with the casting as well, local casting. The colorist, you're wondering what that is, that's the grader who grades the color of the film and is an increasingly important element in these films, particularly digital films. So big thanks to Jean Clement there. Oh, catering.
Oh, they were good.
Appallingly named name for some caterers, but they're very exceptionally quality food they produce.
They were really, really good.
Under an inauspicious name. We were able to go back to Mumbai and record a children's choir, obviously via AR, which is a lovely kind of connective tissue back to Slumdog Millionaire. And thanks to all AR's people for making it happen at very, very late notice, everything.
The good people at Pathé, who are our partners on the film, along with Fox Searchlight, thanks to all of them.
And particularly Francois Ivanel, who first suggested this a long, long, long time ago, and who has seen it through from the beginning to the end. And, of course, all our partners at Fox Searchlight as well.
And to the Utah Film Commission, who made us most welcome. People of Utah were very hospitable. And there's a great tax credit there to any producers out there looking for a break. Go to Utah, it's a good place. And there we have it. Thank you very much for listening. This is Christian Colson saying goodbye.
Simon Beaufoy saying goodbye.
And Danny Boyle saying goodbye.